story begins. Julien Renard held the watch under the magnifying lamp with hands that had restored over 3,000 timepieces in 17 years. The light caught the scratches on the case. Patek Philippe, 1942. Reference 1518. One of the rarest watches ever made. The client had found it in his grandfather's estate, wanted it restored, didn't care about the cost, just wanted it to work again. Julien worked in a small atelier in Geneva's Old Town. 300 square feet. Workbench facing a window overlooking cobblestone streets. Walls lined with tools that had belonged to his own grandfather. The space smelled like metal polish and old leather and the specific chemical sweetness of watch oil. He was 42 years old, never married, lived alone in an apartment above the shop. His life revolved around the intersection of precision and history. Every watch told a story. Most people never bothered to listen, but Julien listened. He opened the case back carefully. The movement inside was frozen. Decades of neglect had seized the gears, but the craftsmanship was stunning. Hand-finished bridges, gold chatons, a perpetual calendar mechanism that still showed the correct moon phase despite not running since 1965. Julien began the disassembly. Each component removed with tweezers and placed on a tray lined with white paper. Mainspring barrel, center wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, escape wheel, balance wheel. Under the balance wheel, something caught the light. Engraving. Not factory marks, not serial numbers. Something else. Julien pulled the surgical loops down over his eyes, leaned closer. The engraving was microscopic, carved into the metal with a precision that shouldn't have been possible in 1942. Numbers, letters, symbols. 47.3 degrees north, 7.5 degrees east, minus 23.11.42 dash. Coordinates, a date, a dove symbol. Julien's hands stopped moving. He'd restored hundreds of vintage watches, found engravings before, watchmakers signing their work, dates commemorating special occasions, love notes etched inside wedding gifts. But coordinates? And on the movement itself, hidden where only someone taking the watch apart would ever see them? He photographed the engraving with his phone, opened a mapping application, entered the coordinates. The pen dropped on Basel, right at the border between Switzerland and Germany, where the Rhine River bent and 3 countries almost touched. The date? November 23rd, 1942. The middle of World War II. Julien set down the tweezers, pulled off his loops, stared at the watch components spread across his workbench. This wasn't just a watch. This was a message. But from who? And for what purpose? Over the next 3 days, Julien couldn't stop thinking about the coordinates. He finished the restoration mechanically, cleaned every component, replaced the mainspring, oiled the pivots, reassembled the movement, set the time. The watch ticked back to life after 60 years of silence. But his mind was elsewhere. He researched the watch's history. The serial number led to production records. Patek Philippe archives. The watch had been sold in Geneva in March 1942. Buyer, anonymous. Payment, cash. No paper trail, no owner history, nothing. He researched the coordinates. Basel in November 1942 was strategic. Switzerland was neutral. Germany occupied France to the west. The border was heavily monitored. People trying to escape Nazi-controlled territory would cross into Switzerland if they could. But crossing was illegal. Switzerland turned back refugees, sent them back to certain death, unless someone helped them. Julien opened his laptop, searched for Swiss resistance during World War II, found limited information. Switzerland's official position was neutrality. Helping refugees was officially prohibited, but unofficially, some people helped anyway. He found a reference to a watchmaker, Heinrich Baumann, Geneva-based, worked during the war years. The mention was brief, a footnote in a book about Swiss collaboration. Heinrich Baumann produced luxury timepieces for Nazi officers throughout the occupation. His workshop in Geneva served German clientele exclusively. He died in 1944 in a factory fire. His collaboration with Nazi regime is well documented. Julien felt sick reading it. A Swiss watchmaker who sold to Nazis, profited from evil, died in a fire that was probably justice. But something nagged at him. If Baumann made watches for Nazis, why would one of his pieces have coordinates for an escape route carved inside? Julien searched for more information on Heinrich Baumann, found almost nothing. A few references in Swiss watchmaking history books. Always the same narrative. Collaborator, profited from war, died in suspicious fire. No photographs, no interviews, no personal history. It was like someone had deliberately erased him from the record, left only the Collaborator label behind. Julien made a decision. He called the client, asked if he could delay returning the watch for a few days, said he wanted to research its provenance. The client agreed, didn't care, just wanted it working eventually. Julien started searching for other Baumann watches. What he found changed everything. Over 2 weeks, Julien contacted every vintage watch dealer he knew, auction houses, private collectors, watch forums, asked if anyone had a Heinrich Baumann piece from 1942 to 1944. 6 watches surfaced, all Patek Philippe, all from the same 2-year period, all in private collections. Owners willing to let Julien examine them for authenticity verification. The watches arrived one by one, shipped insured for hundreds of thousands of dollars each. Julien signed for each package with shaking hands. He opened the first watch. Same procedure. Disassemble, examine, photograph. Under the balance wheel, coordinates, date, symbol. 47.4 degrees north, 7.6 degrees east, 15.01.43, Basel area, January 1943. Star symbol. Second watch, 47.2 degrees north, 7.5 degrees east, 08.03.43, heart. Third watch, 47.5 degrees north, 7.4 degrees east, minus 22.0643. Fourth watch, 47.3 degrees north, 7.6 degrees east, minus 14.0943. Fifth watch, 47.4 degrees north, 7.5 degrees east, minus 3.1243. Sixth watch, 47.3 degrees north, 7.4 degrees east, minus 19.0244. All coordinates within 10 kilometers of Basel. All dates between November 1942 and February 1944. All with different symbols. Julien plotted every coordinate on a map of the Basel region. The points formed a pattern. Different crossing locations along the Swiss-German border, each one at a different geographical feature. River bends, forest paths, rural roads. These weren't random engravings. These were escape routes. Julien sat back from his workbench, felt the weight of what he'd discovered pressing on his chest. Heinrich Baumann wasn't a collaborator. He was helping people escape. The watches were sold to refugees, luxury items that wouldn't be searched at borders. Inside each one, coordinates for safe crossing points, dates when patrols would be minimal, symbols to identify which route to use. It was brilliant. Dangerous, and completely invisible to anyone who didn't know to look. But if this was true, why was Baumann labeled a Nazi collaborator? Julien needed more information. He called the Swiss Federal Archives, asked about Heinrich Baumann. Watchmaker, Geneva, 1938 to 1944. The archivist was helpful, pulled files, called Julien back 3 days later. "We have a file. It's complicated." "What do you mean?" Baumann was investigated by Swiss authorities in 1943, accused of selling to German officers. The investigation concluded he was collaborating, but the file was sealed in 1945, required special authorization to access. Why sealed? Doesn't say, just marked National Security, Restricted Access. Julien's pulse quickened. "Can I get authorization?" "You'd need to petition the Historical Commission. Takes months, maybe years." "What if I had evidence that Baumann was actually helping refugees?" Silence on the line. Then, "What kind of evidence?" Julien told him about the watches, the coordinates, the dates, the pattern of escape routes. The archivist was quiet for a long time. "If that's true, this is significant, very significant. I can fast-track your petition, but you'll need to provide documentation, photographs, proof." Julien spent the next week photographing every engraving, documenting every watch, building a case file. He submitted it to the Historical Commission with a formal request to access Baumann's sealed file. The response came in 2 weeks. Request approved. Access granted. File available for review at Federal Archives, Bern. Julien took a train to Bern the next day. The file was thicker than he expected, 47 pages. Documents from 1942 to 1945. Investigation reports, witness statements, financial records, and photographs. Heinrich Baumann's face looked out from a 1940 identity card. He was 38 years old in the photo. Serious expression, dark hair, watchmaker's magnifying loupe hanging around his neck. He looked like someone who paid attention to details. The investigation report was damning. Witnesses testified that Baumann sold watches exclusively to German officers, that he refused Swiss clients, that he traveled to Germany regularly, that he profited enormously from Nazi patronage. The evidence seemed conclusive. But then Julien found a note paper-clipped to the final page, handwritten, dated April 1945. Investigation closed. Subject deceased. Factory fire March 1944. Evidence suggests arson. Motive unknown. Case sealed pending further review. Inspector H. Weber. And beneath that, in different handwriting, dated May 1945. Do not pursue. Baumann's work saved lives. His reputation protects those who helped him. Let the Collaborator story stand. Director L. Schneider. Julien read it 3 times. His work saved lives. Let the Collaborator story stand. The Swiss authorities knew. They knew Baumann was helping refugees, and they deliberately maintained the Collaborator narrative to protect who? The people who helped him? The refugees who escaped? Julien photographed the note, photographed every page of the file. Then he saw something in the financial records, a ledger page from Baumann's workshop, dated January 1943. Sales column. Multiple entries for Patek Philippe, reference 1518, sold to H.M. The initials repeated. H.M. bought 7 watches in 1943 alone. Who was H.M.? At the bottom of the ledger, a penciled note. Payment received via H. Morgenstern, Geneva Relief Committee. Julien's hands trembled. He knew that name. Hermann Morgenstern, a Jewish businessman in Geneva who ran an underground network helping refugees escape to Switzerland. He'd been arrested by Swiss authorities in 1944 for illegal refugee assistance, spent 6 months in prison, released after the war, died in 1967. But his foundation still existed, the Morgenstern Relief Fund, based in Geneva, providing aid to refugees and displaced persons globally. Julien left the archives, took the train back to Geneva, went straight to the Morgenstern Foundation office. The director of the Morgenstern Foundation was a woman in her 60s named Rachel Stein, granddaughter of Hermann Morgenstern. She listened to Julien's story with growing intensity. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to a filing cabinet, pulled out a folder. My grandfather never talked about the war years, not to my mother, not to me. He said the past was buried and should stay buried. But before he died, he left me this. She opened the folder. Inside, photographs, letters, a small leather journal. He wrote everything down, every person he helped, every route, every contact. He hid it for 50 years, gave it to me a week before he died, said, someday someone will ask. When they do, give them this. She handed Julien the journal. The first entry was dated September 1942. Met with H. Baumann today. He proposed a plan. Luxury watches as cover. Coordinates hidden inside. Refugees buy watches in Geneva. Carry them to border. Open them at designated time and place. Follow the map engraved inside. Brilliant. Dangerous. Necessary. I agreed to fund production. First delivery, November 1942. Julien's vision blurred. He was holding the proof, the direct testimony. He kept reading, entry after entry, dates, names, watches delivered, routes used, families saved. The final entry was dated February 1944. H. Baumann is dead. Gestapo raided his workshop last night. They knew. Someone talked. Heinrich destroyed his records before they arrived, set fire to the workshop, died in the flames. He saved the network, saved hundreds of names from being discovered. The Collaborator story will protect everyone he helped. Let him be remembered as a traitor, better than being remembered as a hero who got people killed. Julien couldn't breathe. Heinrich Baumann had died protecting the people he saved, burned his own workshop, destroyed evidence, let himself be labeled a Nazi collaborator so the refugees wouldn't be hunted down and sent back. Rachel's voice was quiet. How many watches did you find? 7, including the one I was restoring. 7 watches. Each one represented multiple families. My grandfather's notes say Baumann produced 23 watches total, sold through the Relief Committee. Each watch used by an average of 8 families. Julien did the math. That's 184 families, maybe more. We don't know exactly, but at least 184 Jewish families escaped to Switzerland using routes hidden in Baumann's watches. And he died to protect them. And let history call him a collaborator. They sat in silence. Then Rachel said, "We need to find the survivors, or their families. We need to tell this story right." Julien nodded. "I know how to start." Over the next 6 months, Julien and Rachel launched a search. They contacted Holocaust research organizations, survivor registries, Jewish genealogy databases, posted in forums, reached out to museums. The message was simple. Did your family own a Patek Philippe watch during World War II? Did you escape to Switzerland in 1942 to 1944? We need to hear your story. Responses came slowly at first, then faster. An email from Israel, a letter from New York, a phone call from London. 14 families responded. All had the same story. My grandfather bought a watch in Geneva in 1943. He was told it would help us cross the border safely. We didn't understand until my father opened it years later. Inside were coordinates. We followed them. We survived. Each family still had the watch, passed down through generations, kept as a family heirloom. None of them knew about the other watches. None knew about Heinrich Baumann. Julien examined each watch remotely. Photographs sent via email. Every one had hidden coordinates, hidden symbols, hidden dates. He mapped all 23 routes, plotted them on a historical map of the Swiss-German border. The precision was stunning. Each crossing point had been carefully chosen. River bends where patrols were minimal. Forest paths with natural cover. Times when guard changes created gaps in surveillance. Baumann had been methodical, professional, absolutely committed to getting every detail right, because details meant the difference between life and death. One survivor agreed to meet Julien in person, Miriam Goldstein, 89 years old, living in Tel Aviv. She flew to Geneva with her son. They met at Julien's atelier. Miriam carried a small wooden box. Inside, her father's watch, Patek Philippe, reference 1518, 1943. My father bought this watch with the last money we had. The man who sold it to him said it was more than a watch, said it would tell us when and where to go. We didn't understand. She handed the watch to Julien. My father died in 1987. Before he died, he told me to open it, to see what was inside. I did. I saw the numbers, the coordinates. I didn't know what they meant, but I kept the watch, kept it safe. Julien opened the case back. Same procedure he'd done 23 times now. But this time the owner was here, watching, remembering. Under the balance wheel, 47.4 degrees north, 7.5 degrees east, minus 12.08.43 minus. Star of David symbol. Miriam gasped. That was us. August 12th, 1943, the night we crossed. We walked through a forest. My father had a piece of paper with numbers. He said a man gave it to him, told him to go to these coordinates at midnight. We did. We crossed into Switzerland. Swiss police found us the next morning. We were arrested, held for 3 weeks, but we were alive. Her voice broke. And we stayed alive because of that watch, because someone cared enough to help us when helping us was illegal. Julien showed her the photograph of Heinrich Baumann from the archives. Do you recognize this man? Miriam stared at the photo, shook her head. No, we never met the watchmaker. The man who sold us the watch was someone else, an intermediary. His name was Heinrich Baumann. He made these watches specifically to help families like yours escape. He hid the coordinates inside where no one would find them unless they knew to look. What happened to him? He died in 1944. The Gestapo discovered what he was doing. He destroyed his workshop and all his records to protect the people he'd helped. Let himself be killed so you would stay safe. Miriam cried. Her son held her. Julien stepped back, gave them space. When she could speak again, Miriam said, "He should be remembered, not as a footnote, as a hero. That's why we're here. That's why we're telling this story." The exhibition opened at the Geneva Watch Museum in March 2025. Time for Freedom, the Watchmaker's Code. 23 watches displayed in individual cases, each one accompanied by the story of the family who used it. Photographs, letters, testimonies. In the center of the exhibition, a large photograph of Heinrich Baumann. Beside it, the note from the Swiss archives. His work saved lives. Let the Collaborator story stand. And beneath that, the truth, finally told. Heinrich Baumann, 1902 to 1944, was a master watchmaker who used his craft to save lives during the Holocaust. Between 1942 and 1944, he produced 23 luxury timepieces containing hidden coordinates for safe border crossings into Switzerland. These watches were sold through an underground network led by Hermann Morgenstern and used by at least 184 Jewish families to escape Nazi persecution. Baumann died destroying evidence that would have exposed the refugees he helped. For 80 years, he was labeled a Nazi collaborator. Today, we honor the truth. He was a hero. The exhibition opening was attended by 300 people, 14 families who had used the watches, descendants of Hermann Morgenstern, Swiss historians, Holocaust researchers, watch collectors who understood the significance, and Miriam Goldstein, who stood in front of her father's watch and told her story to anyone who would listen. "This watch saved my life. The man who made it died so I could live. I never knew his name until now, but I will never forget it again." The Swiss government issued a formal statement, recognized Heinrich Baumann as a righteous person who saved lives at great personal risk, added his name to the Swiss Memorial for Holocaust Rescuers. Julien stood in the museum during the opening, watched people examine the watches, read the stories, understand what precision and courage looked like when combined. Rachel Stein found him near the main display. "My grandfather would be proud. This is what he wanted, the truth, finally in the light." Julien looked at the watches, 23 pieces of metal and crystal and hidden engravings, objects that most people would see as luxury items, status symbols, investments. But they were more than that. They were proof that one person could save hundreds of lives with nothing but skill and courage and absolute commitment to doing what was right when the world said it was wrong. 3 months after the exhibition opened, Julien received a package at his atelier. No return address, postmarked from Zurich. Inside, a watch, Patek Philippe, reference 1518, 1942, and a letter. "Dear Mr. Renard, my name is Sophie Baumann. I am Heinrich Baumann's great-granddaughter. My family has kept this watch hidden for 80 years. We were told never to show it, never to speak about it. The Collaborator label was meant to protect us. But my grandmother died last month. Before she died, she told me the truth. Told me about the watches, about the coordinates, about what my great-grandfather really did. She said it was time. Time to let the last watch be seen." This is number 24, the watch Heinrich kept for himself. I think he would want you to have it, to complete the collection, to finish telling the story. Thank you for giving our family back its honor. Sophie. Julien's hands shook as he opened the watch. The movement was pristine, never restored, original in every way. Under the balance wheel, no coordinates, no date, no symbol. Just 2 words, engraved in the same microscopic precision. Never forget. Julien closed his eyes, felt the weight of history in his hands. Heinrich Baumann had made this watch for himself, put no escape route inside. Just a reminder. Never forget the people who needed help. Never forget the courage it took to help them. Never forget that doing right sometimes means being labeled wrong. Never forget. Julien added the 24th watch to the museum exhibition, placed it in the center, changed the count to 184 known families saved, added a note, and unknown others who carried Baumann's coordinates in their hearts. The watch ticked quietly behind the glass, keeping time, keeping memory, keeping faith that precision and courage still mattered. 2 years later, Julien received an email from a researcher in Poland. A newly discovered diary from a German officer stationed near Basel in 1943 mentioned suspicious Swiss watches being carried by refugees. The officer noted that the watches were luxury items and therefore allowed through checkpoints without inspection. He never looked inside them. The researcher estimated that if Baumann's network operated at the documented efficiency, the actual number of people saved could be closer to 300. Julien updated the exhibition. 300 lives, 24 watches. One watchmaker who chose conscience over safety. The exhibition became permanent. The Geneva Watch Museum made it the centerpiece of their collection. School groups visited, survivors visited, watchmakers visited, and everyone who saw it understood something fundamental. Objects carry more than value. They carry intention, purpose, meaning. A watch isn't just a machine that tells time. It's a message from the person who made it to the person who carries it. Heinrich Baumann's message was clear. Time is precious. Use it to save lives. 5 years after the exhibition opened, Julien stood in his atelier on a quiet Tuesday morning. The window was open. Spring air drifted in from the cobblestone streets. On his workbench, a new acquisition. Patek Philippe, reference 1518, 1943. Not one of the 24. This one was different. The client had found it in an estate sale in Argentina. No provenance, no history. Just a beautiful watch that didn't work. Julien opened the case back with practiced hands, began the familiar process of disassembly. When he removed the balance wheel, he already knew what he would find. Coordinates, date, symbol, 47.5 degrees north, 7.3 degrees east, 17.04.43, watch number 25. Julien photographed the engraving, updated his database, contacted Rachel Stein. I found another one. How many do you think there really are? I don't know, but I'm going to keep looking. Because that's what Heinrich Baumann would have wanted. Not to be remembered as a hero, but to have every person he saved be remembered as someone worth saving, every family worth protecting, every life worth the risk. Julien finished the restoration. The watch ticked back to life. 82 years after it was made, still keeping time, still carrying its secret. He would find the family who used this watch, tell them their story, add it to the collection. Because stories like this don't end. They multiply, they spread. They remind us that precision isn't just about mechanics. It's about caring enough to get every detail exactly right when lives depend on it. Heinrich Baumann understood that. And now, 8 decades later, the world understood it too. The watchmaker's code was simple. Time is all we have. Spend it saving others. Have you ever discovered an object that carried a hidden story? Something ordinary that turned out to be extraordinary? Share it in the comments. And if you believe that precision and courage can save lives, subscribe. These stories need to be told. These people need to be remembered. And the truth should never stay hidden.